Hi there. I'm Dr. Debi Silber, and I study and teach about betrayal. I don't think anybody teaches about betrayal unless you have to. It's my 30th year in business, and after two really painful betrayals, the first one from my family and then from my husband, I looked at those two experiences, and anybody who's been through it, you're blindsided, you're shocked. The world as you've known it no longer exists. And I looked at those experiences and I said, well, what's similar to these? And I realized that I had never taken my own needs seriously. I wasn't on my own to-do list. So here I was. I had 4 kids and 6 dogs and a thriving business. And I was 50 years old. And I said, that's it. So got my husband out of the house and I enrolled in a PhD program in transpersonal psychology. That's the psychology of transformation and human potential, because I was transforming. I didn't quite understand it. He was too, on his own, wasn't ready to look at that. And then it was time to do a study. So I studied betrayal. What holds us back? What helps us heal? And what happens to us physically, mentally, and emotionally when the people closest to us lie, cheat, and deceive? That study led to 3 groundbreaking discoveries, which I'd love to share with you. The first thing was I was studying something called post-traumatic growth and betrayal and post-traumatic growth. And if you imagine kind of an upside of trauma, how any trauma, death of a loved one, disease, natural disaster, leaves you with a new insight, awareness, perspective that you didn't have before. So let's say you lose someone you love and you realize life is short. And but I had been through death of a loved one and I had been through disease, but betrayal felt so different for me, but I didn't want to assume. So I asked all my study participants and I said, if you've been through other crises besides betrayal, does it feel different for you? Hands down, unanimously, they said, it's so different. And here's why. Because betrayal feels so intentional, we take it so personally. So the whole self has to be rebuilt. Rejection, abandonment, belonging, confidence, worthiness, trust, they're shattered. So if I were to give you an equation, it would be post-traumatic growth, the rebuild after trauma, after crisis, plus rebuilding the self equals a new term I coined, which is now called post-betrayal transformation. So that is the complete and total rebuild of your life and yourself after betrayal. The second discovery was that there's a collection of symptoms, physical, mental, and emotional, so common to betrayal, it's known as post-betrayal syndrome. And what's so interesting with that is we have a post-betrayal syndrome quiz on our site to see to what extent people are struggling. Every age group is represented, almost every country. And we've all heard time heals all wounds. I have the proof that's not true, because people write things. There's a question that reads, is there anything else you'd like to share? And people write things like, my betrayal happened 40 years ago, and I can still feel the hate. My betrayal happened 35 years ago. I'm unwilling to trust again. My betrayal happened 10 years ago. Feels like it happened yesterday. So we know that when it comes to betrayal, time doesn't heal it. We've had probably close to 25,000 people at this point take the post-betrayal syndrome quiz, and we see to what extent people are struggling. There are physical, there are mental, there are emotional symptoms. And the reason why I wrote the book, Trust Again, just one stat, we pull the stats every few months, 84% of that 25,000 have an inability to trust. 67% prevent themselves from forming deep relationships because they're afraid of being hurt again. 90% want to move forward, but they don't know how. The stats we're getting from that quiz are staggering. So the third discovery, this one was so exciting. And I'll never forget handing my research over to my study chair, who said, Debbie, I believe you've discovered a process here. And what we realized was, while we can stay stuck for years, decades, a lifetime, and so many of us do, if we're going to fully heal, we're going to move through 5 now proven predictable stages. What's even more exciting about that is now we know what happens physically, mentally, and emotionally at every one of those stages, and we know what it takes to move from one stage to the next. What does that mean? It means healing is predictable. So just to give you a brief run through of the 5 stages, I mapped them out in the book, Trust Again. We teach them within the Post-Betrayal Transformation Institute, but here you go. So stage one is, if you imagine four legs of a table, the four legs being physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. What I saw with each participant was a real heavy lean on the physical and the mental, and kind of neglecting the emotional and the spiritual. What does that look like? Looks like we're really good at thinking and doing, and not really prioritizing the feeling and being. So think about it. If a table were to have only two legs, it's easy for that table to topple over. That's us. It's not to say if you're just busy thinking and doing, it's a setup for betrayal. It's just what I consistently saw. Stage two, by far the scariest of the stages. This is shock. This is D-Day, Discovery Day. This is where that person kind of takes the mask off and says, this is who I've been this whole time. And it's the breakdown of the body, the mind, and the worldview. So what happens here is you've ignited the stress response. Now you're headed for every single stress-related symptom, illness, condition, disease. Your mind is in a complete state of chaos and overwhelm. You cannot wrap your mind around the information you just learned. And your worldview has shattered. Your worldview is your mental model, the rules. Trust this person, don't go there. This is how life works. And in one moment, everything you've known to be really true is no longer. The bottom is truly bottomed out on you. So it's terrifying. But think about it. If you were walking down the street and the bottom were to bottom out on you, what would you do? You'd grab hold of anything and everything you could to stay safe and stay alive. That's stage three. Survival instincts emerge. It's the most practical of all of the stages. If you can't help me, get out of my way. How will I survive this experience? Who can I trust? Where do I go? How do I feed my kids? It's that practical. Here's the trap, though. This is the most common stage to get stuck in, and here's why. Once you've figured out how to survive, because it feels so much better than the shock and trauma of where you just came from, you think it's good. So you start settling in here and you're like, okay, we can do this. And a few things start happening. The first is you start getting these small self benefits. You get to be right. You get your story. You get someone to blame. You get a target for your anger. You get sympathy from anybody you tell your story to. You don't have to do the hard work of learning to trust again. Should I trust you? Should I trust you? Forget it. I'm not trusting anybody. So you start planting some deep roots here. Now that you're here for a while, you're not meant to be here for a while, but because you're planting those roots here, now the mind starts doing things like, well, maybe you're not all that great. Maybe you deserved it. Maybe this, maybe that. Deeper roots. Because like energy attracts like energy, now you're attracting circumstances and people and relationships towards you to confirm that this is where you belong. It gets worse, but I'll get you out of here. Because it feels so bad, but you have no idea there's a stage 4 and stage 5 waiting for you. Right here is where you resign yourself and you say, well, I am so unhappy here, but I better find a way to get used to it. So here's where you use food, drugs, alcohol, work, TV, keeping busy, reckless behavior. You do this for, and I talked about that in my first TEDx, stop sabotaging yourself. You do this for a day, a week, a month. Now it's a habit, a year, 10 years, 20 years. And I can see someone 20 years out and say, that emotional eating you're doing, that drinking you're doing, that numbing you're doing in front of the TV, do you think that has anything to do with your betrayal? And they would look at me and say, I'm crazy. They'd say, well, that happened 20 years ago. But do you see? All they did was put themselves in a perpetual holding pattern in stage 3. Anyway, if you're willing to get rid of those small self benefits, leave them behind, and grieve more in the loss, a few things you need to do, you can move to stage 4. Stage 4 is finding and adjusting to a new normal. Here's where you acknowledge, I can't undo my experience, but I control what I do with it. And I always use the example of, if you've ever moved to a new house, office, condo, apartment, whatever, your stuff's not there, it's not quite cozy yet, but it's going to be okay. And when you're in that mental place, you're turning down the stress response. You're not healing just yet, but now you've stopped causing the massive damage you were causing in stages 2 and stage 3. What's interesting about stage 4 also is, think about it. If you're moving, you don't necessarily take everything with you. And what I found so interesting to stage 4 is, if your friends weren't there for you, right here's where you've outgrown them. And people say to me all the time, Dr. Debi, I've had these friends for 10, 20, 30 years. Is it me? Yes, it is. You're undergoing a transformation and they simply don't fit. When you're in stage 4, you've made it comfortable, you've made it your home, you can start moving into the fifth most beautiful stage. And this is healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. the body starts to heal. You turn down the stress response, self-love, self-care, eating well, exercise. You didn't have the bandwidth for that earlier. Now you do. Your mind starts to heal. You're making new rules, new boundaries based on everything you've been through. And you have a new worldview based on your entire experience. And the four legs of the table. Remember, in the beginning, it was all about the physical and the mental. By this point, we're solidly grounded because we're focused on the emotional and the spiritual too. Those are the 5 stages. So what's so interesting about betrayal is it's the setup for transformation. You've been through the worst of it already. You owe it to yourself to heal. And within the PBT Institute, we teach, how do you know if it's safe and in your best interest to just heal yourself and move on? That's what I did with my family. It simply wasn't an option to rebuild with them. Or how do you know if it's safe and in your best interest, if you're willing, if you want to, if the situation lends itself to rebuild something entirely new with the person who hurt you? And that's what I did with my husband. So not long ago, we married each other again, new rings, new vows, new dress, and our 4 kids as our bridal party. So really, to wrap this up, what I would say is staying stuck has now become a choice. We have the roadmap to literally walk you through each of those stages. You don't have to stay stuck, sick, sad. You're not crazy. You're not alone. You can heal from all of it. You're looking at someone who did. We have hundreds of people within the PBT Institute who are doing it too. Betrayal is one of the most painful of the human experiences. But if you have those symptoms of post-betrayal syndrome, you move through the 5 stages, you can enjoy that healthy, whole, healed space of post-betrayal transformation. I wish that on all of you. Thank you.